There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. And with me tonight is retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. How you doing?
I'm doing good, and I couldn't help it, but I had to get another Italian from Brooklyn, and we got – I love Italians, please. We got retired Brooklyn Assistant District Attorney Michael Vecchione, who was the chief of the Homicide Bureau in Brooklyn, but he's also an author of several books. I'll put them up on the screen. This is his latest, Homicide is My Business. And this is another one, Crooked Brooklyn. I'm not going to focus on that. I just want you to know the credentials of this man. And we're going to speak about the Idaho case. It's 2 weeks. This case has been in the public eye, a national, international case. And we as citizens of this country, we expect our police to make arrests on major cases. And maybe we're spoiled because we expect it to happen really quickly. And when it doesn't, we freak out. And especially the press. The press gets all bent out of shape and they start pointing fingers and you get all these talking heads coming out of the woodwork. And I want to put a little sanity to this and bring in some sane people. And that's why I have Phil Grimaldi with me tonight and former Brooklyn District Attorney, Assistant District Attorney, Michael Vecchione. Mike, what's your biggest concerns right now? 2 weeks is up in this horrific case where 4 college kids from the University of Idaho were slaughtered in their sleep at knife point.
Well, I think, you guys being detectives and being, on this, having been on the street and done this work, know that the longer a case goes, the more difficult it is to solve. And that is really what my biggest concern is. You said it, Bill. We're 2 weeks into the case. And even though we don't know, we as the public don't know what the police have been doing, they may be doing and may be on the verge of solving this. But if they're not, then the more time passes, the more difficult it's going to become to solve this case. And there's one other little thing. There are so many people involved in this case, so many hands, so many eyes in terms of law enforcement that you hope that they're not stepping on each other in terms of what they're doing. And those are the 2 biggest concerns that I have at this point.
Mike, I always say that especially in these major cases, more is not always better.
Correct.
Because sometimes you need to fine tune the investigation. And if there's too many hands, with the hands come the egos. Yep. And the egos are sometimes more dangerous than the hands. Phil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about with your hands. Come on, tell us about it.
Let me tell you something, Billy. All right. No, okay, aside. You're making a good point, Billy, because a lot of times when too many people get in, a lot of times the case could be going in a certain direction and the egos, whether it be a boss or different agencies, start to get in and someone could be stubborn that they're interested in, taking the investigation in a different direction. That's dangerous. And Mike brought it up before we went on the air. We were talking about it. That's going to be more stuff that a defense attorney can go into to try and mount a defense if someone is arrested and the prosecution moves forward. So that's one of the concerns. You would think, though, with this type of a case, I mean, it seems like very horrific. 4 people murdered in their sleep with a knife. The police have come out and said publicly several times, one of the individuals, possibly more than one, but at least one were targeted. So I think that kind of takes the serial killer scenario off the table for me with all the other facts. I mean, the serial killer possibility is still there because the case hasn't been solved. So anything's possible at this point. However, I'm not giving it a lot of percentages with regard to what I think is going to be the outcome of this case. I said before, and I'm going to say it again, I believe it's going to be someone from that community, that local community, that's possibly familiar with hunting and with that type of a knife, since they've indicated the specific type of a knife that they believe it to be. So you would think with all of the 103 pieces of evidence that they've recovered, they said that this week a lot of the forensic stuff would be coming back from the lab. So I think things may be heating up and we're just not hearing about it. It seems to be quiet coming from law enforcement. So let's just hope sooner rather than later that there's going to be a successful conclusion to this case with an arrest and
One of
prosecution.
the problems early on in this investigation was the messaging put out by the Moscow Police Department. Obviously, they haven't had a murder in 7 years, so they're not experienced with this. And including it with the investigation is how to get the messaging out. That's very difficult, but that's also very important. Early on in this investigation, they said, oh, no one has anything to worry about. That was a bad message to put out there because, yes, everyone has something to worry about. There's a killer out there that just killed 4 people. Unless you have him in handcuffs or he's dead, we got something to worry about right now. Mike, you want to talk upon that?
Yeah, well, I think, yes, I thought that was a very bad message to send. What I'm about to say ties in with what Phil just talked about in terms of a target. They said that it seems as if these people were targeted. I disagree a little bit about that, not that necessarily taking out the fact that it could be a serial killer. Just because someone is targeted doesn't mean that the target is someone that the bad guy knows. They could be targeted for a reason that only the bad guy, knows and keeps in his head. Serial killers kill people and kill many people for sometimes one particular reason or maybe 2 particular reasons. And he or she targets a person who fits into that little box. So I believe that targeting is a wide definition. And just because they say that they were targeted doesn't necessarily mean that the killer was picking one of these 4 people and went after those 4 people. It could have been for a reason other than serial killing. I think it could also be, I don't believe it is a serial killer, but I just want to make sure that the public knows that the fact that they say they were targeted doesn't eliminate a serial killer from possibilities. That's really what I think needs to be said. I just think I want to go back to what we talked about a little bit before in terms of the number of people involved, Bill. I once, and what happens is that when there's so many people involved, everyone is trying to do what they can and essentially solve the case or provide enough help and information so that others who are in charge of the case solve the case. And they sometimes go off and say things either in a statement, maybe in a call to 911 or to a detective or person on the street talking about. It turns out that what they're saying isn't necessarily the fact or a fact in the case. I'll give you an example. I had a case involving a double homicide, 2 police officers killed on the street by a member of then the Black Liberation Army. When the cops first arrived at the scene, you can imagine there were hundreds of guys cops that responded to that case. The first call in over the air to Central was, we're looking for a 5'5", 5'6" Hispanic who has gotten away. You know what the defendant was? A 6'2" Black African-American man who had gotten into a car and taken off. What the cop was doing was looking down at one of the victims. The bad guy's partner got killed. He was this 5'5", 5'6" Hispanic, and he conflated it. Instead of saying that's one of the victims, he said, well, this is who we're looking for. And I got to tell you, I tried that case. That was a huge problem because the defense attorney kept harping on the fact that they got the wrong guy. They framed this guy. Look who they were looking for right when the problem happened, when the crime happened. So that's
Mike, also with that, you have all of these FBI behavioral analysis people.
Right.
And I'm not trying to put down the FBI, but I don't have any faith in them. During the Beltway sniper, they said the guy was a male white in his 30s. Yeah. It was a male black 17. Come on.
Yeah. Yep.
And the same thing, the Unabomber, they didn't ID the Unabomber. The guy's brother called in and gave him up.
Correct.
So I don't trust that science. I trust that they're trying as hard as they can to use that, but it's really not a science. It's sort of like a junk science.
No, and it's a product of television. CSI was a very popular. Criminal Minds was a very popular TV show, and is back on the air now, and is talking about, once again, a serial killer who may have struck in different parts of the country at different times, or may have had a group of people who are copycatting him. So everyone's, and that's what I'm afraid of. People's statements are sometimes colored by the idea of what they have seen on television, or
there's too many talking heads with this case. Way too many.
Yeah.
Let me just play this, guys.
Live now from Fox. It's been 2 weeks since 4 University of Idaho students were found stabbed to death in their room, while police and federal said they are hundreds of leads. No have been named, and there are still so many questions. I do want to bring in Joseph Scott Morgan. He is a forensics professor at Jacksonville State University and does have a hit podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Of course. First off, your thoughts on this case that so many people are paying so close attention to.
Well, the first term that comes to mind is perplexed, and just the sheer volume of physical evidence that's going to be found at the scene could be quite daunting for all of those involved. The biological evidence, specifically as it's related to blood evidence, and of course from that springs DNA, and so it will make matters very difficult to weed through. The trick is how well are you planned in advance for an event like this, and what resources do you have at your disposal? The rub is, however, when you're talking about a smaller jurisdiction, they're not used to handling a case of this magnitude. It's not a knock against them. That's the reality of it. It's rural America, and they don't deal with quadruple knife-related or sharp person injury-related homicide. Not many people do, actually. This is kind of an outlier statistically.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the questions come into play, because you don't have that many quadruple homicides that are happening in Idaho, let alone in Moscow, Idaho, involving 4 university students that are murdered there from a
We're not talking about quadruple homicides in New York City either. It's a rarity anywhere in the world. If 4 people are murdered at the same time, that's a rarity. And of course, put down Idaho and Moscow, Idaho. If that happened in New York City, I think the biggest murder I had was like a double or a triple. I never had a quadruple. And that will challenge any police department, any detective bureau, any DA's office, and their investigators. Phil, what do you got?
I had a triple, and it was solved rather quickly, fortunately for us. But yeah, these are complicated cases. When you get even a double is complicated, because now instead of dealing with one victim and one set of victimology, now you have 2, and now in this case you have 4. So listen, the bottom line is this: when they do come up with a suspect, they've recovered 103 pieces of evidence that they're talking about, forensic evidence. That to me is science. Now, when we're talking about this behavioral analysis unit from the FBI, it's kind of like, listen, I don't want to put them down. It's kind of like guesswork, though. They use a lot of statistics and stuff like that, and they come up with a pattern, or they come up with what they believe is the profile of what this type of killer would be. And a lot of times it's pretty good. It's probably close at the end of the day, but I don't think they're going to be able to say here's your man, go get him. That's not what's going to happen with the behavioral analysis unit from the FBI. So listen, I'm sure that they're going to take any help they can get, especially from the FBI. They do have great crime labs and stuff like that. Hopefully there's some very competent investigators as well. But again, Bill, you and I have talked about it. FBI doesn't work on murder cases on a daily basis. A lot of time it's white collar crime and different things like that. So let's just hope that everybody's putting their best foot forward. It's a very unusual case, even though they didn't have a murder in 7 years. I'm sure the detectives are trained in interview, interrogation, evidence collection, things like that. So I'm confident that we're going to get a successful conclusion to this case. Let's just hope that there's no mistakes made that could be detrimental to the prosecution going forward.
Mike, you want to talk about the person? Everyone has touched upon this, but the personal nature of using a knife.
Oh yeah,
And especially in this case, using like what has been sort of identified by the pathologist as a K-bar knife. You want to speak upon that?
I do, because I've had a couple of cases when I was in the homicide bureau involving a knife, and a knife is it's obviously a very personal type of homicide, because this sounds stupid, but you're up close and personal. You have to be up close, and you have to essentially touch the person, as many times as this person did. That's getting, as personal as it could possibly be. But there's one other thing about a knife that I think hopefully will be part of the answer or the evidence that they use to come up with the answer. And that is what happens to a knife when you use it as violently as this guy apparently did to his own hands. A knife doesn't necessarily stay stationary in your hand when you're doing that kind of slicing or thrusting. It slides. And unless it's got some kind of a guard between the blade and the handle, then
Mike, I think this knife has something called the hilt.
Yeah,
that
it does.
Is the guard, but you could see your hand could still slide over that.
Without a doubt.
Don't forget, there's a lot of blood too. The blood's going to make it even more slippery. And like you said, the thrusting. Now, when you thrust into a human body, you're going to hit something hard at some point. You're going to hit a bone or an organ, and that's going to cause the hand to possibly
slip.
So,
exactly.
So if there is a glove, let's say a person's wearing a glove, if it's a sharp instrument, and obviously it sounds like it was very sharp, that could cut through and cause bleeding and injuries to the person's hands.
That's why. And number one, and the other thing, Bill, is that they're speculating that it's this K-bar knife. They don't really know. They know that it's a sharp blade, probably a hunting knife of some kind. But beyond that, I believe the answer will be in there, because I think that person who is the defendant here, or the bad guy, has left blood, his own blood, in and among the blood that they found in that place, among other things. I think that the answer is in the forensics, and you could go and interview 1,000 people and may never come up with the answer, but the science, the real science, could give you the answer because of either DNA or something else in that crime scene that will help them solve the case. I think that they are just beginning to get the answers from the forensics that they have been collecting over 2 weeks. It takes, as you guys know, a long time, and I think that they're not going to tell us that they have maybe identified a person or persons to, who have done this, but they may have gotten an idea already, because I think that forensics are going to tell you who did this. That's I believe it's, I don't think it's a serial killer, quite frankly, guys. I think it's somebody who, and this is not, I'm not being a genius when I say this, someone who knows these people because of two things. One, he had to know the combination of he had to know that sliding door, if that was part of the security guard, he had to know how to get into that sliding door, and he knew where in that house he was going to find the people that he was looking to kill, because he did not go downstairs and kill those two girls in the first floor, the basement floor. So that's why I believe it's somebody who is involved with that group of people, or someone who knew them. And
Mike, I 100% agree with you. I also think that it's 85 to 90. Like, people want to say, "Oh, it could be a woman." No, I don't think so, because First of all, 85 to 90% of murders are done by males.
Yeah, I don't think it's
so
a
I
woman
think if
either.
you go and
No.
the rage that was exhibited in this murder, I think it screams out male. Yeah, people can say, "Oh, it could be a woman." No, I don't think so.
Bill, I just want to make a point about the forensics that Mike was just talking about. Now, there's reports that, now listen, he spent time in this house. He killed 4 people. He slaughtered 4 people. He didn't do it in 5 seconds. And it looks like he spent some amount of time inside the house. They also reports that perhaps he locked doors or pulled doors closed on the bedrooms where the victims were found. And that's why there was that confusion in the beginning about 911 called saying that a person was unconscious. Maybe they tried to get in. They weren't answering the door. They thought maybe they were drunk from the night before.
Yeah.
So they called it in as an unconscious. Now, with that said, if a person is staying in that apartment or that part of the house for a period of time, hairs could fall off their body. There's a thing called touch DNA. All you have to do is touch a surface and you leave DNA, obviously blood. So again, I think you're right, Mike, that there's going to be the key to the case to tying the perpetrator to the homicide is going to be in the forensics. Obviously, fingerprints could be left as well. And then there's a thing, Bill and I have talked about it before, called major case fingerprints, where if you leave just the tip of a finger or something from your palm, major case prints, they put ink all over your hand and they get the prints, they recover any part of your hand that will leave some type of an identifying print. So something like that, it doesn't have to be a major print. It could be just a little tip of a finger. That's something that'll be able to lock the person in that they were inside of that location.
Absolutely. One of the most vicious cases that I ever tried involved just that. It involved a woman who was stabbed 60 times, and it involved the bad guy leaving a palm print on the wall above where he left the woman on the floor. And when we got the guy, the first thing that the detectives did was they took major case prints. They took his entire palm. And by the time I got to the precinct to take a statement from him, they had already had him identified as being, the guy who had left that print on the wall because of the major case prints. So the forensics today are the way that people get convicted, and they're almost, I don't want to say foolproof, but they're very difficult cases to fight if it's done right. And that's why I go back to the idea that there are a lot of people involved in this. And I think that the more people involved, the more chance a defense attorney will find something among the paperwork that all of these people have to file and turn over to him that could help him form a defense that could help get this guy off from, get this guy found not guilty. When I first heard about this, I said, oh my God, there are just so many people here sticking their nose in, and
too many cooks spoil the broth, as they say, right?
Paperwork. You know what I used to hate, to tell you the truth? When I was a prosecutor, I'd get the police file, and I would have to start reading every detective or police officer's either DD5 or initial report that came in. And I can't tell you, I was looking at it and I say to myself, where did this guy get this fact? Because there's nothing in that I know of that is there. And it was just poorly written. And somebody, instead of writing maybe something plural, writes it singular, or singular instead of plural. And that is something that good defense attorneys jump on immediately when they have to try a case. And that's what I used to tell guys in my office when I was doing a case and it was in charge and we were doing the investigation right in the office. We're talking to somebody, don't take notes. I didn't want them to take notes because, first of all, I could remember things that I needed to remember, but I didn't want them to take notes because, again, when you're sitting down and you have to now type from the notes, which are notes, they're not verbatim as to what happened. Somebody could interpret something the wrong way, type it the wrong way, and now I'm stuck with it as the prosecutor. So that's a very big potential problem in this case, guys.
Schmitty, thank you for the $5 super chat. Your comments, they towed the cause just today for more evidence collection. Can you give your insight as to why it took so long to do so? Is this normal? No, it's not normal. It's not normal. I think that they should have probably taken the cause away day one and brought them to a forensic facility to process it. I don't know why it took them more than 2 weeks to tow the cars away.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you're not subscribed, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. If you want to contribute to our podcast, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel memberships, and you see the folks in the chat with the green font. They actually pay to see us perform every one of our podcasts, and we appreciate them. I want to play a little bit of this. There's a lot. There's another FBI sort of talking head, but let's see what he has to say.
The ability to.
This is the father.
To grieve the way that I want to grieve. I want to be able to have justice first.
Oh, man, that was the heartbroken father of a University of Idaho student, one of 4 murdered in their sleep earlier this month. Police now getting ready to release the crime scene once investigators finish examining the site, collecting any evidence. Joining us, former FBI investigator Bill Daly. Just absolutely heartbreaking, Bill, to hear from that father there who, not only lost his child, but still has no answers in respect in custody. How are we here this far out from when this happened?
Well, Sandra, first of all, this is a very complex scene. In other words, what I'm saying here is that,
I just want to comment upon that. That is like typical of the press. Blaming the police, like 2 weeks have gone by, you haven't arrested anybody, as if it's so simple to do that. And that narrative goes out to the entire public. And then people start pointing at the police as if they're doing something wrong.
Absolutely.
Instead of the fact that, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say you had 2 floors to cover. You had 3 bedrooms to cover, plus the means of entry. And then whatever happened outside, you had to worry about that on that porch, whether there's evidence there. So that's a lot of ground that has to be gone over minutely. I mean, they've got to go over it with a fine-tooth comb and with magnifying glasses in order to, not literally, but figuratively, to find enough evidence to convict or to make an arrest. So,
but Mike, it makes the public look at the police as if they're not doing their job.
Exactly. I understand that. And, and it's a fine line that the cops and police departments walk in this situation, because do you give out information to make sure that the press is kept at bay, or do you hold it back because the greater good here is to make a good case and to make a case that's going to stick in court? So, you have to have a police department that doesn't necessarily care so much about this publicity being out there, or this negative publicity, because they're doing their job. And there aren't a lot of people in this country who think that way, but that's the way you have to think. I believe, anyway.
Yep.
it's not something where it's a single family home where you have a couple of, you have a pet and a couple of people living there. This is one that has had multiple people and multiple tenants. Who knows the last time it was cleaned? You have hairs, fibers, fingerprints, maybe other DNA that's around. And for police and forensic experts to sort through this, it takes a while. So this investigative onion, if you will, is taking a while to reveal itself. At the same time, there's no individual suspect that's kind of jumped out either by past behaviors, comments, threats, or what have you, that they kind of be able to kind of focus in on. It appears as though it's someone further back around the orbit of one or several of these people who may be responsible for this.
So I was hoping to learn something here when they say they're close to releasing the crime scene. Does that mean that they're close to turning over that house to its owner, assuming the kids were renting from a landlord there, that's it? People come in and clean and this is done? The search inside that house is done?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, there could be a reason why, if there's a prosecution moving forward, they need to go back to either take photos or do something else in the home.
Because the cars are still parked outside of the students who were killed.
So what it means, Sandra, is at this point, what they've done is they've contained the crime scene, they preserved it as best they can. And now they're ready to say, we've collected all the evidence we feel as though we can collect here, and now turn it over to the owners to clean up and put it back into shape.
Correct me if I'm wrong, with the slow release of information from the authorities, which could be a strategy, right, on their part, to protect what they know, to not let on to the suspect that they know the information they have. But there's a lot of rumors out there and a lot of room for speculation. And now these rumors have been debunked by the police there in Idaho, including that red Mustang that was near the scene. They say that was not involved. There was a February overdose death in town. They're saying that was not related. This case, they are saying, is not linked to any other murders. That is interesting to me that they can rule that out without having the suspect in custody. Tell us in a second. The victims were not tied or gagged, and the dog skin nearby, which we all knew that story initially, is not connected to this. So tell me your thoughts based on those debunked rumors.
Well, first of all, those rumors are ones that just been kind of created and floating around. They didn't come from some archaic body. The other crimes that were committed, the ones in Washington and Oregon, they've ruled us out because they've probably looked at the forensic evidence. They've combed through and they've kind of said, no, this does not match the profile. At the same time, talking about profile, the FBI does have their profiles and their behavioral analysis people involved in this case. So they too have been able to kind of weigh in on what things get ruled in and ruled out. But it is something at this point that is not something that's, we can tell right now, is solved in a 60-minute melodrama television production. There's a little while. The crime scene was probably very complicated, as I mentioned before, about other factors of people being in the home previously, as well as mixture of DNA and separating those.
I got to leave it there. Are you confident that they'll find the suspect?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
All right, Bill, good to have you on set here.
He was one of the better talking heads that I've seen. He was pretty good. He wasn't, all these guys want to be the genius that says, yeah, I think it's a serial killer. And, I get, it makes me nauseous,
The interesting part about what he said was, and the thing that kind of, I didn't even think about before, is that's the kind of place where kids of that age are probably there every day, every weekend, partying, drinking, who knows what's going on in that place. So there's got to be stuff, or I'm sure that they had to, collect more than they ever thought they would have to collect in terms of evidence from that scene because of all.
Like I said, they needed elimination fingerprints and elimination DNA for the amount of people that were in that house.
Without a doubt.
When they get a strange DNA that they don't know, I mean, that could be, the 50 guys that were there last week having a party in that house.
Correct. And the same,
I think the blood evidence, if it's commingled with the perpetrator's blood, that's going to be real key because, not everybody's coming in there and bleeding, so to speak. So I guess, touch DNA, fingerprints, different things like that. Of course, there's a lot of traffic in and out of that location. It's a college house, off-campus house. So there's probably a lot of kids in and out of there.
Yeah.
One of the family members was saying, I believe it was, Kaylee, it might have been Kaylee's sister, that there was different things going on in the house, and they didn't want anyone to think that if you come forward with information to the police that you're going to be in trouble for, let's say, underage drinking or narcotic use. We talked about that before. That could be holding back people that might have seen something because of some other illegal activity. She did stress when she said it in the interview, the police are here to solve a quadruple homicide. That's what their interest is. That's what their goal is. So again, anybody that has information, if it's got something along with it that's criminal in nature, just give the information. That might be the key to solving this horrific crime.
Folks, tonight our guests are Michael Vecchione, retired Brooklyn Assistant District Attorney, who is the head of the Homicide Bureau in the Brooklyn DA's office. On the screen is his latest book, Homicide is My Business, Luigi the Zip. And here's another Crooked Brooklyn, Michael Vecchione and Jerry Schmetterer. I know he's got a bunch of other books and he's writing a series of books, but very qualified individuals to have on this show to talk about homicide investigation. And it's a breath of fresh air to have a different point of view than Phil and I have. We come from, the gumshoe. Let's wear out our shoes and get out there and talk to the public. Mike looks at it in a little different way because he's the one that's going to have to stand up in that courtroom and prosecute these cases.
And that's a very important component to homicide investigation. Of course, a lot of people may not know it, but in Brooklyn and I guess throughout the 5 boroughs, anytime that you were working on a homicide and you wanted to make an arrest for murder, you had to get authorization from the DA's office. And the prosecutors in the DA's office were usually involved in the case with regard to steering it or asking for specific things to be done
Without a doubt.
before a arrest was authorized for homicide. So again, that might be what's taking place in this case. Like Mike said, there could be someone that's identified or they think may be involved, and the prosecutors that are going to wind up eventually prosecuting the case are saying, well, let's wait for the forensics to come back. Let's do this. They could be keeping their eyes on somebody we don't know, and keeping a surveillance or keeping tabs on somebody that could be considered a person of interest or a suspect. And prosecutor's office takes a big part in these cases, and it's usually from the early onset of the case.
Yeah, because when you do all of this work, when you guys do all this work, you don't want it just simply for naught. You want it to turn into something that will hold first of all in a court of law, and that some guy who deserves to go to jail goes to jail. I mean, that's basically what we want to have happen here. So so a prosecutor being involved, as we were in Brooklyn, during the investigation, sometimes, other times at the end of the investigation, and then we were consulted to enhance it in some way, because I've done both, enhancing as well as being involved in an initial, during the course of the initial investigation. But at the whole point of this was to look forward, or it was to look to the trial and to make sure that the work of the police doesn't go for naught, and that somebody walks out of court with a not guilty verdict because of some little thing that could have been corrected during the investigation or right after the investigation. So,
Mike, I want to ask you something though. I not that I'm a soothsayer or I predict things, but for me, being a homicide guy, I look at this perpetrator as, I think some way he was disrespected in a way that such rage built up inside him. And and don't take this wrong, anyone who's listening, I think only a woman could do that to a man, where he was maybe demasculated and he was just enraged. And that's what this personality of this murderer, to me, what it looks like.
Sounds like you're going into the behavioral analysis.
No, I don't mean to, but I think it does.
No, you're right. You're right. I agree with you.
Criminal minds.
Yeah,
Well, think about it this way. The first 2 people that this individual killed were those 2 young women who were.
Well, actually, Mike, it was the male and the female.
I'm sorry.
we think it was
correct.
the floor.
You're correct. He came in on that. Yes, that's correct. But let's put it then let me switch this around. If that was all he was there for, was to just, mayhem and to kill people, well, then he stops and he goes and he leaves. He's killed 2 people. He's gone. He then goes up to another floor in the building, in the house, and finds these 2 women and kills them. So I do think that there was something that happened, whoever with this particular killer and one of the people in that house. I just feel it in my bones. And, I just don't see this as being some guy who happened to be in Moscow that day and wound up killing, 4 people. One thing I learned today, though, one of the new things you asked before, Bill, is that, there was a football game on campus that day. And the stadium holds like 15 or 16,000 people. So, so that's another factor that we have not talked about, of people who were not necessarily part of that community, who had come to the community to watch the football game, which makes it even more difficult for the police to eliminate people or to zero in on someone.
Mike, that's definitely a defense attorney
angle.
A defense attorney would throw into the mix. Did you know there was a football game that day?
Yeah,
16,000 people, and one of those people could have been a psychopathic murderer. Yeah,
and quite frankly, Bill, the best prosecutors are the guys who think like defense attorneys, or women who think like defense attorneys, because if you don't stay ahead of what they're thinking, then you're going to get caught. And But to me, that's a factor that very well could play in this. I'm not sure it does.
Let me make a point. Let me make a point about the crime scene real quick. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Mike, but
No, go ahead.
we really don't know how he went in and out of the location. But we know that Ethan and Kaylee were in that second floor bedroom, and Madison and Zana were in the third floor bedroom. Now, he could have gone in through the third floor, committed the homicide on the third floor, and then perhaps maybe the target was really on the second floor, or someone from the second floor came up to hear the noise and he went down and he murdered those two. We really don't know what took place first. We don't know if the couple was killed first or if the two girls on the third floor were killed first. Now, more than likely, it seems like he came from the level, which was the second floor, the sliding door in the back. That's what seems most likely to me.
Phil, let me just say something. Really, the second floor is, for all intents and purposes, is like a first floor because it's at the ground level.
Right.
And the first floor is really below
the basement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The first floor, I think, that was the original structure. And I think the second part of it was added on. That's the way it appears to me. And I mean, there's been a lot of talking heads kind of agree with that. So it seems like that was an addition. But because of the terrain goes up, it's higher up. So it's higher up. So that's where the second floor comes in. Now, you have that parking lot back there. You have some woods. It would most likely seem that he came in from that direction. Since no one on the first floor was alerted to an intruder, no one was harmed on the first floor. So my thinking is he either came in through that second floor, the sliding glass door that's at the ground level of the back, or he got onto that deck and went through that second floor sliding door there. There's two possibilities there. More than likely, it's the first possibility that he went in through that back door. And I think there were reports, and I can't confirm it, that that back door was left open a lot of times.
Yeah, there was one report. But this brings me back to what I said before. I'm not sure how anybody could say that the couple was killed first before the two young women. I don't, unless there's something that we're not being told. I just don't, and maybe the police know this already. Maybe they know.
I think good crime scene investigators might be able to figure it out. Bill and I talked about it because of cast off from the blood and what the struggle was, the defensive wounds, different things like that. I think if a good crime scene investigator gets in there and they study it, and it may take a little time, they'll probably be able to figure out who was killed first because of, defensive wounds and maybe different things that if there's a sign of struggle and stuff like that. And if they do know, if they can figure out where he came in, where he went out, and I'm saying he because I do believe it's a he, then I think that also, if the sliding glass door is very close to that bedroom where we believe the couple was on that second floor, then more than likely it would indicate that would be the first person or persons that were killed. But again, we don't know. We don't have intimate knowledge of the case folder. But I think that good crime scene investigators would be able to figure that part of it out.
I don't disagree with you. Well, now the father today, there's something that was, I think, new to me anyway, said that his daughter, and I think that's Kaylee's father, who's been the one who's talking, had defensive. He was told by the police and the medical examiner that his daughter had defensive wounds on her. I don't believe that there's any information that any of the other three.
I think Zania Knodel had defensive wounds.
Oh, she did? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, we were also told that they were sleeping and then, did they wake up when they were stabbed violently in the chest, which is, I think this guy was going for a kill shot. Stabbed.
I agree.
You know what? I think that just your instincts and your reaction, if someone's thrusting a knife into you and you feel that you're going to grab at it. So that may be where the defensive wounds came in, or struggling and fighting, you're waking up, you're half asleep, someone's thrusting a knife into your chest and, you go into a panic, you go into a frenzy. That could be what it is too. But we talked about this before and Bill just brought it up, a kill shot. If someone's asleep and you take that big Bowie knife and you get them good in the chest, I think there's going to be very little screaming. I don't think you'd be able to scream because of a sunken chest wound. And I think that might incapacitate the person probably in the first or the second shot. And they said each of the victims had numerous stab wounds. So again, there may not have been struggle on some of the victims.
And it would have to, because think about this. If you have 4 people who were killed and there's no evidence of that one of them or 2 of them or 3 of them had gotten up because there was someone screaming to look to see what was going on, then this guy had to have been very, very strong, and he did use and did deliver a kill shot to virtually all of them, because otherwise, how were they not, screaming or fighting or some kind of noise that would have alerted the other three to something going on in the house? And if they were alerted, then I don't think you would have had 4 people killed. I think you would have had, the initial person and maybe another, but they would have gotten out. So I think that, he was very, very strong and was able to find a spot on the body that he knew was going to be the kill shot. And, the middle of the chest, he gets the heart, and that's it, Yeah.
Idaho students go back to class after the long holiday weekend, as police seem to have few leads in the murders of 4 students at their home off campus. I'm Angie Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. We're taking a closer look at what we know so far in the murders of those 4 students a little more than 2 weeks ago. Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Znodal had been for the night and were killed sometime after they returned home in the early morning hours of November 13th. Maddie and Kaylee were captured on a video at the Grub, that was a food truck, short before they went home for the night. They had the Corner Club bar for that. Ethan and Xana were dating and had been at a party at the Sigma Chi house earlier in the evening. Here's Captain Roger Lanier of the Moscow Police Department discussing the timeline so far.
On the evening of November 12th and into the early morning hours of November 13th, Kaylee and Madison arrived home at approximately 1:45 a.m. after visiting a local bar and a street food vendor.
I just want to say that one of the reasons I'm playing this is because they've been requesting video and still photos from the whole community. And that timeline was just changed from 1:45 to 1:56. So 9 minutes later, it's significant. There's 9 more minutes that were unaccounted for. So as I said, they're continually getting video sent to the FBI website as well as still photos.
Ethan and Xana were also out in the community at Sigma Chi, and they arrived home at approximately 1:45 a.m. 2 surviving roommates who were also out in the community arrived home at approximately 1 a.m.
Now, later that morning, it was 11:58 a.m. A 911 call was placed from one of these surviving roommates' cell phones. They had actually called a friend to the house because they believed that one of the people who was actually killed was sleeping and unconscious. Police and 911 call takers had actually spoken to more than one person at the home time. Autopsies revealed victims were all stabbed, and some of them had defensive wounds. Others were stabbed as they were sleeping. Police have said there were no signs of sexual assault. So far, police say they've been able to rule out some people related to the investigation. Joining me to discuss the very latest on this case is forensic.
I just wanted to bring that some of these facts we already knew, but I wanted to highlight the fact of the timeline changing, the fact that the students are now back on the campus, right? And the fact that investigation is a continuous process of inclusion and exclusion. And that's what it is. You include people and you exclude people as you clear them.
100%. I think it's a big fact that one of the factors that may very well play a major role here is that the students are back. And I don't know how many were around that day or that night or that afternoon or that weekend or whatever it was. But now that all of them are back, you may very well get somebody who walks into, a precinct up there and says, I got to tell you about this particular guy. He had a fight with Kaylee, or he had a fight with Maddie, or something of that nature. It may play a role here. And then finally, that will be the case. One other thing I just want to mention. Do you guys believe that when they say that people have been eliminated, that it's eliminated because of forensics or eliminated because of some other reason? Because one of the things that could eliminate somebody is that they have enough, or they have zeroed in on one particular guy or one particular individual and that's why they can eliminate these other people. So,
Mike, I want to speak on that real quick because they talked about a video where these kids had gone to a food truck before they went home, and there was apparently someone in the background that looked to be mulling around, possibly stalking. Now, they said they cleared that person. I think they identified that person. They probably got a good, solid alibi on that guy. Doesn't mean that down the line there can't be some new, somebody comes forward with some new evidence and says, I lied to say he was with me or whatever, and he could be put back into the pool of being a perpetrator. But I think that's probably what they're talking about when they eliminate people like that. As far as talking to people and you start to zero in somebody and then you clear them, I'm asking for a DNA swab, and Bill and I talked about that too.
Absolutely.
And if they're really in the suspect pool, we're going to get the prosecutor's office to get us a subpoena to take the DNA.
No, there's no question about it. No question. You hit it right on the head. I just find it, what happens is when you have the press so much involved in this thing and they talk about, well, this guy's been eliminated and this guy's been eliminated, it gets to the point where, the cops start to say something because they feel that they're going to be criticized if they don't say something. So, they throw stuff out there that may very well be something that they should keep to themselves, at least until the end of the case is
Mike, we would always say that the press can be your greatest ally and your biggest enemy.
Yep, absolutely.
Sometimes they release stuff that you do not want released, and it can literally destroy the case. And they don't care. They do not care. And I used to cringe because the NYPD had a policy of being very transparent with the press.
Yeah.
They gave the press whatever the hell they wanted. And I used to pull my hair out. No, don't tell them that.
Right.
And people way above my rank said, shut up.
You know what? One other thing we haven't heard a lot about, I guess I'm sure that they have done something with this, but what about that bar in terms of where the two young women were? Have they gone to that place? And I would assume that they have, to see whether or not there were any, altercations, whether there was anything crazy going on, whether there was something that might lead them to. I haven't heard a thing about the bar.
I don't have independent knowledge of that, but that would be part of the investigation. Also, almost every bar in this land now has video.
Yeah.
You know what?
Protect themselves insurance-wise. They have video in the bar.
Absolutely.
There might be something to that, Mike, because the dad, I think it was Kaylee's dad, did an interview on Saturday night on Fox News, and he said that he was going on the news to do this interview, and that the reporter that he was going to speak to had been very good to him, and he wanted to share some information with him. And the investigators in the case asked him not to share it. He said it was related to stuff that the family had uncovered through her phone, her cell phone. I don't know if it was text messages, emails, calls that she had made. So there could be something to that, because you would think about it. If there's some type of an incident, maybe, the girl sent the text, this guy's freaking me out, or there was a fight or whatever it is. That's what kids do when stuff goes on. They're immediately on something crazy goes on. They're on social media reporting it, videoing it, or if something happens, gossip between kids or whatever, they're texting friends. Oh, you never believe what so-and-so said to me. So there could be something to that, Mike. That's a good point that you brought up.
I think, and what would also add to that, Phil, is that I think it was Kaylee who, when she got back home, made 6 or 7 or 8 calls to her ex-boyfriend. Why? Was she trying to tell him that some, punk was bothering her at the bar, or somebody he knows is bothering? That's why
they supposedly left off as good friends too.
Did he call her back? Because he was sleeping.
Yeah.
Did he call her back not knowing she was dead?
Yeah.
And they also said that Kaylee, I think it was Kaylee's father, said that they left off as good friends, and that they were very, very close. So maybe something, for her to be calling 6 and 7 times, maybe something did transpire earlier that night that she wanted to tell him. We wanted his advice, his opinion, wanted to bring him up to speed on something. So again, all of that stuff is very important.
Maybe
Charisma,
someone he knew.
Charisma, thank you for the 149 super sticker.
Thank you, Charisma.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you're not subscribed, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us the thumbs up. If you want to support this podcast, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel memberships. Francesca Camilleri. I want to say it correctly. I wanted to say calamari, but it's Camilleri. Thank you for
That's why
joining.
you need us. Yeah,
That's right. That's why I need these.
You
two
mean
Italian guys.
Galamad? You were going to say not calamari. You were
Maron,
gonna say
good
calamad.
Don't
Don't ever say calamari in front of me, Bill. Please.
That's right. I say it the Irish way, you know. But Francesca Camilleri, thank you for joining our YouTube family. Welcome aboard to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. You know, this is, I mean, we can't lose sight that these are 4 young, beautiful kids.
It's a real sin. It's a real
horrendous.
sin.
We were all parents. We can't even imagine the horror of this. But this is for law enforcement, this is an extremely, extremely challenging case. And we hope that that they have the best and the brightest working on this case. And that, you know, one of the things I wanted to say before, Mike, and you were talking about the danger of having too many people work on a case. One of the things I found that was also when you have big egos, you find that big detectives, they try to keep stuff secret just to them and their partner because they want to make the splash.
Yeah.
And I used to go crazy over that.
Yeah.
I used to say no
secret squirrel shit. I don't like that.
You know, guys used to do it all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it would drive me out of my mind. Don't keep stuff to yourself. The other thing, Mike, back in the day, when detectives didn't type their DD5s before they went home, and they would have something like a smoking gun piece of information, and you're like, why didn't you type your 5? Oh, I was tired. I want to kill you. Get in here. They'd have to come back from Rockland County or from Putnam County. Get back into work and type your damn DD5. You know?
Yeah. You know, the thing is, you know, we're all human. Everybody is that involved in law enforcement and are human beings. And, you know, mistakes are made. Sometimes they're made on purpose, or they're kept, as you said, Bill, you know, they're kept, they keep things secret because they want, you know, the glory. When they can walk through the perp walk with the guy coming out of the precinct, they want to be there on one arm and hide things so that, you know, you as a sergeant can't give it to someone else to, you know, to run with and make the arrest. So it's unfortunate, but it happens. And, you know, I hate to, you know, I've been involved with too many of them to just fluff it off as being, you know, it happens once or twice. It happens more than that. And it's unfortunate. And I don't know if it's happening here. We don't know. You know, that's the thing. We don't know. But the more people involved, and I'll repeat myself, I'll say it for the one last time, the more people involved, the more chance of an issue arising or a problem, you know, coming up or, you know, coming to the surface is great. So I just hope that they have narrowed it down to several investigators who are given particular jobs to do and to carry the ball, so to speak.
You know, Mike, the biggest part of my job when I was in Manhattan North Homicide was to really organize these cases. So that's a big science too. To organize who does what, to organize where the evidence is going, who's taking the evidence, who's doing the phones. All of that stuff is a huge organizational nightmare.
Correct.
And in a case like this, that's where it can go off the rails because who knows how to do that in this department because they've never had a case this big before, you know? And that's where hopefully they'll get help. That's where they'll need help. I need you to do this. You deal with the phones. You deal with the blood evidence. You deal with the vehicle. I mean, it's all unbelievable, time consuming, and it really taxes your brain, especially when you're not sleeping, when you're working 14-hour days and you're eating pizza and Chinese food. That's what we eat in New York. I don't know if they eat that in Idaho. Yeah. In Idaho, they may be eating potato pancakes. I don't know.
What we had Nathan's in Coney Island, so we used to grab a hot dog and French fries on.
Right. We used to call it cop food. You have the worst diet: pizza, hot dogs, Chinese. Oh, what do you?
Listen, you're right. I can remember being out at precincts with taking statements. It's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and these guys, the cops say, "What do you want to eat?" And I say, "Are you crazy? I'm not. I know where you're going to get something. I'm not. I don't want to eat any of that stuff. I'll wait till I get home."
Well, Mike, the most evil food on earth was White Castle.
Yeah.
Guys in the 3-2 squad would
Belly
go out and get one
bombers.
of those
Yeah.
White Castle suitcases. I was like, I will not eat that stuff.
Right. But
That's-
there were a lot of reasons to go to the 6-0 to to do the statements. The best one though was Nathan's. And what are you going to say, L&B or
no, I was going to say. I thought you were going to say Gargiulo's.
Gargiulo's.
Italian
Nah,
restaurant.
Gargiulo's. You had to sit down and
that was.
yeah. I'm talking
Guys,
about.
I'd like to dine. I prefer not to eat fast food.
You want to know the truth, Mike? When I worked in the 6-0 squad, I was there from 89 to 96. We very rarely got a chance to go sit down and eat. A lot of times it was Chinese food, like Bill said, Nathan's. And
Yeah.
it's funny because we used to have, the manager Nathan's would give the precinct these coupons where, they had the specials. Hot dogs were $1. And so you get 4 or 5 hot dogs for a couple of bucks and an order of French fries, and that was your dinner. Everything was done on the fly because a lot of times we'd be working a homicide, maybe like 3-4 hours into the tour, catch a homicide, we're on it. Now it's 10, 11 o'clock at night, and another homicide happened or another shooting. And we were all over the map. Coney Island was busy back in those days, and I'm sure you remember. You were.
That's why
I knew I was going to offend someone with that potato remark. And someone wrote, I live in Moscow. We don't grow potatoes up north, only down south. I'm sorry. But I also disparaged New York by and cops, but we only eat pizza and Chinese food when we're working on a case. And then White Castle,
And you know what the most impressive thing about that is? That there's someone in Moscow, Idaho, listening to us right now. So
people. One of the things that
that's
people like
great.
across the country, they like to hear on New York accents. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Phil, want to take care of this here?
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at jmurray-law.com. Joe is a great criminal defense attorney, and we only bring the best on this show like we have tonight with Mike Vecchione, former Brooklyn prosecutor.
Folks, Mike Vecchione is not just a former Brooklyn prosecutor, but I'm going to put his books up on the screen again so you can buy these books. You can get this on Amazon. Homicide is My Business, Luigi the Zip. And he also has another book out called Crooked Brooklyn. I know he's got a bunch more, but I wasn't going to put all of his books tonight. That's enough.
That's okay.
That's enough of a sales pitch for him.
Thank you. Since I was here, Homicide is My Business is now out on audio book as well. So and Amazon has it as well as Barnes and Noble. So but thank you very much for the pitch, Bill.
You're very welcome. Mike, I just thought, there's been so much analysis on this case, and Phil and I really come from the practitioner basis of that real homicide guys that think that the way to solve cases is to get out on the street and shake the trees and see what comes out of the trees. We even talked about the other night interviewing the criminal element, go into the jails, go in, start interviewing parolees, interview the sex offenders, get out there, shake the tree. That's how you get information. Who do you think bad guys hang out with? Other bad guys.
Yeah.
Who do bad guys tell things to? Other bad guys. So we took a little piece of New York policing and recommended that they do some of that.
Well, I think that is a very good thing, a very good suggestion. And it's funny you mentioned, because I can recall that I've done a lot of trials, as you guys probably have figured out, and a lot of them had to do with informants, wise guys who were turned and things of that nature. And I had a case once with every witness in the case, eyewitness or not a scientist or a police officer, was a wise guy, and or a hanger on, and I know what was going through the jury's mind, because the defense attorney would put it in their mind. You can't believe these guys. And I stood up and I said, the best people, the only people who you can believe when they're talking about the kind of scum that's at the table, the defense table, are the guys who hang with him, are the people who are with these guys. Who do you think they talk to? They talk to their own. Those are the best witnesses you can possibly get. So, your suggestion about shaking the trees out in Idaho is is a very good suggestion. And
Every person that's arrested in that area should be debriefed. Every single
Absolutely.
person from the minute that this case started. Anybody that's arrested, or even if they were released, go find them, debrief them. There could be some information. You know,
Yeah.
we'll help you out with your case. You know the game, Mike. So that's I'm sure
Absolutely.
they should be doing it. They probably are.
Francesca Camilleri, thank you for the $5 super chat. My grandpa was a sergeant in the 7.5. I'm an NYPD recruit. All love. Good luck to you, Francesca.
Good luck.
Good
What
luck.
they say, the NYPD is the front row seat to the greatest show
Greatest
on
show
earth.
in the
And I
world.
guess
Yeah.
it's still true. And I certainly had a fabulous career. I know Phil had a fabulous
Ditto.
career. We got Lieutenant Pete Pranzo in the chat, who's Harlem Raiders is his book. He's a street crime legend, a 3-2 legend. And, you know, as much as we carry the scars of being on the police department for my case, it's almost 27 years, Phil, 21 or 22. You would never give it up for anything in the world. But, you know, we do carry the scars. You carry the bad memories. And so I'm sure, Mike, you do too.
Oh, yeah.
As a prosecutor, I'm sure you have some PTSD. Stuff pops into your head in the middle of the night and you're like, you're not going to run out and get White Castle.
No, I'm not. You know what I do now? I sit down at the computer and I write it because I use it somewhere in one of the books.
That's
So
right.
that's what I've been doing. So but you're right. You can't do this job without having it affect you in some way. And if it doesn't affect you, then you shouldn't be doing the job because, you know, then you're a robot and robots can't solve crimes.
Listen, a lot of it is, you know, stuff that we see causes PTSD, but I really believe, and I was talking about this today with my partner, Artie Williams and Patty Boyle, because we're going to be doing a segment on New York homicide about an old case. We were talking about how when the perpetrator you're sitting in a room, you're face to face with a guy 2-3 feet away, and he's telling you in detail about how he killed someone, a matter of factly. That's got to affect you because there were times when I say that I met the devil, and trust me, I did. I met the devil on several occasions doing interview and interrogation in the box, as they say. And it plays with your mind a little bit because there's times when you're hearing this guy talk about this horrendous thing and you're saying, am I really supposed to be here hearing this? But you are. That's what your job is. And, you know, when you fight for the victim, we always say it, we do God's work. We do we have the obligation, and we have the this tremendous responsibility to get justice for the people that can't get justice for themselves. They can't speak no more. They're dead. So we've been given that privilege, and we have to do it, and we have to take it seriously, and always did. And it's really something that is very unique when you get that, you know, when you're the case detective or you're working on that homicide, you get that feeling you're doing it for that person and their family.
No question.
That's no longer here.
And to me, the best way to end a particular case was after a conviction, stepping out of the courtroom and having the family of the victim, you know, come up to you and thank you. And I've gotten many hugs and kisses and for giving closure to the family. And I remember every one of them, guys. I remember every one of those because it's very important. But, you know, in the PTSD thing, you know, I sit back sometimes now and I think about this, about some of the people that I've had who've come in. One guy who was a longtime wise guy, and I had him as an informant for a year in Manhattan. I'm sorry, in Manhattan. He lived in Manhattan in the MCC in the federal facility, but he was coming to Brooklyn all the time. And we had him for a year, and he told us everything about his life, everything, and he, you know, talked about how his father taught him how to kill people, and you know, at the end of that year, when we had to send him back to AdMax in Colorado, the people who had dealt with him, we took pictures with this guy. We were in a conference room, and we had gotten coffee, and we had, you know, our arms around each other and taking pictures. And I thought about it later on, and I said, what was that all about? How do you get or develop a relationship with someone who was essentially a mass murderer?
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, this guy stopped counting, he said, when he got to 27. And Luigi, the same thing with this guy that I wrote this book about. When I left him, I said to myself later on, I had a relationship with this guy, and he wound up killing 13 people. If I had to tell my father and my mother and my grandmother about this guy and what I spent, how much time I spent with him, they would have thought that I was absolutely crazy. But, you know, that's part of the job. And maybe we are a little bit crazy to do this, but there's something that, you know, you develop when you do this work. And it's not necessarily the right thing, because I don't think being with these guys is the right thing. But at the time, in order to get to the point where you wanted to get, which is to put a bad guy in jail, you have to be with them. And that's what sometimes how it, you know, sometimes affects you. But it's still here, man. I remember those days as if it was yesterday, you know.
Absolutely.
So,
Kinsey K, thank you so much.
Thank you
for the $50 super chat. Thanks for keeping this case front and center. You know,
good.
My feelings are that this case is going to get solved. I really believe that.
I agree with you, Bill.
I believe it's going to get solved through science and through forensic evidence, but someone's going to answer for this. And, you know, that person, whoever it is, deserves the death penalty. And I know they do have the death penalty in Idaho. Let's hope that they capture this guy.
Good.
And get, guys, we're going to, we're at an hour and 10 minutes. Phil, I'm going to let you give final thoughts, and I'll go to Mike, and then I'll say goodbye to everyone.
Final thoughts are going to be, I really feel strongly about a prosecution coming forward in this case and an arrest, because we know certain things that have been publicly stated. We know from, I believe it was Kaylee's father. Yes, Kaylee's father said that the police told him not to give certain information out to the public, to the press. So, and there's probably a slew of things that he may not even know. I'm fairly confident this case is going to go. They're probably building a case, working on the forensics. Like I said before, let's hope sooner rather than later, and let's keep these people and their families in your thoughts and prayers.
Yep.
Mike, final thoughts.
The person who did this left a piece of himself in that house. I don't know what that piece is, but the science is going to find it, analyze it, and that's going to be the thing that points to the killer here. And when it does, not enough bad things can happen to him. He needs to be tried, obviously, according to the law. But I think that if the case is made properly, then he's going to go away for a long time, or he may suffer the death penalty if Idaho has one. And I believe, Bill, you said that they do. So,
yeah, I believe they do.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's so hard to get the death penalty these days because it goes for endless appeals forever, you know.
But my prayers are with the families of those 4 young people. So.
Absolutely. Folks, I just want to really thank everyone for staying with us and supporting us through this case. This is sometimes we cover these cases, and believe it or not, I feel like I'm back on the job, and I get sometimes feel a certain level of PTSD doing these cases on YouTube, and I'm not even working the cases. You know, it's not our job to investigate these cases. It's just to review them and to make suggestions and say how we would do certain things. But I feel the pain in a lot of these cases, and I feel the stress of actually having worked like almost working a real homicide. So, folks, again, thank you so much for supporting Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I want to thank Phil Grimaldi and my guest, former Brooklyn Assistant District Attorney and author, Michael Vecchione. Have a great night, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Stay safe, and thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
One episode just ain't enough.